The honourable member for Bruce.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'll say at the outset, I don't support this bill, Labor doesn't support this bill, and this House should not support this bill. Doesn't matter how much fancy language the government dresses it up with, it's a bill that will whack higher education providers with new charges at the very worst possible time. There's no detail in the legislation about how much people are going to pay. There's no transparency or scrutiny. We heard from the previous speakers that trust us where the government will go and consult, we'll do a bit of stakeholder feedback. Well, we've heard from stakeholders, Labor's heard from stakeholders. The universities say now is the worst time, and the independent higher education providers also say now is the worst time to whack the sector with higher fees and charges. I'm not in principle opposed, I must say, to the idea over time of moving sectors to cost recovery, but not now. University budgets are being smashed. We've heard a lot from the government speakers throughout the debate about their job-ready graduate program. Three-word slogan. Well, this job-ready graduate program will see real funding for higher education fall by 10% over the next 3 years. That's what Senate estimates was told. That's what the budget papers show. Real funding under the government's program for universities will fall by 10% over the next 3 years. Student debts are rising. We've got tens of thousands of Australian students now facing fee hikes. Again, the answers they finally gave to the last round of Senate estimates admitted the truth. What they'd said when they introduced the bill was that, oh well, fees might rise for students by 7% over 3 years. The truth is, on the government's own figures, fees for university students will rise by 16% over 3 years under their so-called reform program. Now is the very worst time to be whacking universities with higher fees. They've already faced losses of $3 billion just in the last period because of international students and the borders being closed. The economy's lost $9 billion from international education already, with more to come. But the government's not helping universities. They've implemented this real cut to their funding and more charges. It's like the minister over there's a little bit jealous of the member for Hume. The member for Hume's got a big stick. I'll get out my slightly smaller stick and whack the sector. We've seen from the government 17,000 jobs have been lost already, and that's just the jobs that show up in organisation charts that you can put a position next to. It's not the other thousands and thousands of casuals, sessional teachers, casual researchers and other support staff. 17,000 jobs lost because the government refused to extend JobKeeper. In fact, they changed the rules 3 times to make sure that public universities in this country were one of the few sectors not eligible for JobKeeper. Teachers, researchers, cleaners, support staff, administration staff, people with families, just like all other Australians, except they happen to work for a public university, and the government was out to get universities. Now, the most immediate impact, of course, of the international student loss of revenue has been on research. We've had a weird funding model for too long in this country, where universities make a profit off teaching students to fund research. Now, the government, I think 3 years ago, they cut $2.2 billion, another little sneaky cut in the mid-year financial update, another $2.2 billion the Prime Minister hacked out of universities, and at that time he and the Treasurer said, well, don't whinge, go and recruit more international students. Well, they did that, and now the government's saying, well, you're a bit dependent on international students, aren't you? The practical impact of this is that our research budgets across the nation have been slashed. We hear the government say, oh, we gave them $1 billion. We didn't actually give them $1 billion. What the government did was bring forward money that they were going to give them in later years, and now they're cutting that money. So at the very worst time, we've got the government cutting university funding, effectively cutting research funding because they've already brought it forward in a national emergency when we need research to contribute to the economic recovery, seeing international education fall over, our 4th biggest export sector, and now they think, well, here's another good idea. We'll whack them with higher fees and charges. I mean, you could wait a couple of years if you want to move to cost recovery until the cash flows for the university have recovered. But I just want to make a few remarks also, because there's a lot of focus in this debate on universities, and very little or none I've heard on independent higher education providers. It's no exaggeration to say that many independent higher education providers are facing oblivion. They're looking at a fiscal cliff in 6 months and 12 months as the student pipeline dries up. if anyone actually understands the nature of these businesses in this sector, they go on a pipeline. As current students leave, there's no students coming to replace them. Now, there's a bit of a myth that gets perpetuated and rolled out, sometimes from people on my side, sometimes the government, that all higher education providers, non-university providers, are somehow dodgy. They're not. Many of them are good, reputable businesses giving quality courses, often in niche markets or skills or areas. Well, I mean it. I'm puncturing the stereotype. Well, if the minister actually cared about them, he wouldn't be whacking them with higher charges at this time. Their international student numbers have plummeted. They're not all dodgy. Now, the government did little to nothing to help them. We've already seen many of them go out of business. Many of them were not actually eligible. They weren't actually eligible for JobKeeper because they weren't going to suffer the cash flow hit in the short term. They were facing a fiscal cliff now. And at the very time when they're fighting for their survival, many of these businesses have been around for decades, when they're fighting for their survival, the government comes along and goes, "I know, here's a good idea. We'll whack them with higher fees and charges and push them off the cliff." If you actually go and talk to these businesses, that's what they say. They already have many legitimate criticisms of Texas performance and behaviour as a regulator, and the one-size-fits-all approach that regulates all the animals in the sector as if they were an elephant. Well, the universities are the elephants in the sector, and there's a lot of other types of providers, small, medium and some large ones. But they get university-level regulation basically foisted on them. There's a sector bias within Texas, which is a different conversation. But it really is, I mean, you listen to previous speakers and you listen to the government's rhetoric. Lower taxes. We're on about lower taxes, lower charges, less burden on business. It's peak irony. I mean, you could say if it wasn't actually serious, this is just trolling the sector. At the very time higher education providers, universities and private ones, need more support from the government, at the very time that their cash flows are being hit, the government comes along and proposes with this bill to whack them with more fees and charges. We heard a government speaker say, well, currently they only pay 15% of the cost recovery for the regulator, so we're going to jack that up to 100%. The very worst time. The final thing I'll say just on the international education sector, which TEQSA has a huge role in regulating, it's more than just dollars. Students are human. They're usually young people who've often made huge sacrifices from them and their families to come and study in our country at some of their formative years. We should welcome that. We should show that care and consideration that these young people have chosen to spend this time in our country, in our cities and regions and towns. Instead, we have the Prime Minister showing an appalling lack of empathy, getting up last year and saying, well, if you don't like it, go home. That ricocheted through the sector. That's exactly what he said, Minister. It's exactly what he said. The minister's over there denying that the Prime Minister told students to go home. I talked a few weeks later with the CEO of one of the large accommodation providers in Sydney. I won't mention the name, but I'm in touch with the sector. I used to be a senior bureaucrat. I chaired the Commonwealth State Officials Group for this sector. I ran the sector in Victoria. I actually do know something about this, Minister, perhaps unlike you who had all your submissions bounced at Cabinet last year. So this CEO of the accommodation provider, in relation to the international ed sector, that's what they tell us. They said that the minister, well, you were actually the immigration minister. You were the immigration minister. That's what the sector believes. Because the Prime Minister and Treasurer were personally hostile to this sector. And any minister that took anything to Cabinet to try and do something got thrown out. No, we're not interested. We're hostile to this sector. But the CEO of this accommodation provider told me very clearly that the day after the Prime Minister said, if you don't like it, go home, he had students lining up at the front desk, taking that literally, saying, well, I have to check out. The Prime Minister told me to go home. Now, many of these students fall in love with Australia and Australians. We should show more compassion and a bit of care and empathy. TEQSA has a role in this, but it's also whole-of-government considerations. We've spoken in other forums in other places about the students stranded offshore, the billions of dollars lost, the lives destroyed, but I also just want to place on the record that there's another group of students, not the current or prospective students, but the students who've already made that investment in Australia, who frankly were sold a promise by the government that if they studied here for 3 years or 4 years or whatever the period was, they'd get a 485 visa, a graduate 485 visa, and be allowed to stay and work in Australia for 1 year or 2 years, as the case may be. The government should do the right thing by these students and actually commit that they will extend, renew or allow students to enter when the borders are open and it's safe to do so. We've got tens of thousands of students around the world trashing Australia's reputation. They feel misled, they feel abandoned by the government that can't even extend them that olive branch and say, we know you've invested in Australia, we know we made you a promise, we will honour that promise. We may not be able to do it now, but we will honour it. It's not a difficult thing to do, and it'd help restore some of our international reputation. This is a sector that relies on word of mouth. I'm sure the minister would agree with that. This is a sector which overwhelmingly relies on word of mouth from former students who studied here, from current students saying to their mates and their families back home, Australia's a good place to come and study, you should come here. That's what marketing of international ed is fundamentally about. And the word of mouth right now for Australia is being trashed. It's a very small thing that the government could do, is extend that olive branch to students who've got a 485 visa or a right for post-study work rights and say that they will be allowed to come back. Thanks, Deputy Speaker.